Good evening, everyone. I would like to read to you one of my favorite Valentine stories. Roses are pink, your feet really stink by Diane DeGreat. There were 15 Valentine blank cards waiting to be filled with a nice Valentine poem. They were sitting on the kitchen table piled high as Gilbert's nose. Miss Bird had told them to write something nice on each classmate's card because Valentine's Day was about liking each other. Gilbert liked Patty a lot. Patty had smiley eyes and a silly laugh that made Gilbert feel silly too. He picked out the biggest card and wrote this inside: Roses are red, violets are blue. I like your eyes, and I like you. Gilbert. Gilbert also liked Frank. Frank let Gilbert use his baseball mitt once when Gilbert didn't have his own. On Gilbert's card, he wrote, Your name is Frank, it isn't Hank. You lent me your mitt, so you I thank. Gilbert. This is fun, Gilbert thought. He continued to write nice Valentine poems until there were only two cards left, one for Louis and one for Margaret. Gilbert didn't want to write a nice poem for Louis. Louis once tweaked Gilbert's nose until it turned red. He didn't want to write a nice poem for Margaret either. Margaret had once made fun of Gilbert's glasses, so he didn't write nice poems. On Louis's card, he wrote, Violets are blue, roses are pink, and your feet are big, and they really stink. Gilbert thought that the poem was funny. Maybe Louis wouldn't. Maybe he would tweak Gilbert's nose until it turned really red. Gilbert didn't want Louis to tweak his nose anymore, so he didn't sign his name. He signed Margaret's name instead. On Margaret's card, he wrote, Roses are red, you're wet your bed, and I think you have rocks in your head. Gilbert liked the poem, but he didn't think Margaret would. He didn't want Margaret to say mean things about him, so he signed the card Louis. On Valentine's Day, Gilbert walked to school with 15 cards and a tin of Valentine cookies that his mother had baked for the party. Mrs. Bird let everyone open their cards. One for Gilbert's card had X's all over it, so he opened it first. Roses are red, violets are blue. You are my friend, and I like you. It was signed Patty. Gilbert smiled at Patty, and Patty giggled back. Gilbert opened the rest of his cards. They were all very friendly. Even Louis had written a nice poem. You may be small, but you're not very tall, but I like the way you play ball, Louis. Gilbert was happy that Louis liked the way he played ball, and Margaret too. Sometimes you are very sweet. I hope you brought nice cookies to eat. Love, Margaret. Gilbert smiled to himself. Margaret thought that he was very sweet. He looked over at Margaret, and she wasn't very happy with one of her Valentines. He stuck her tongue out at Louis. Louis wasn't happy with one of his Valentines either. He stuck his tongue out at Margaret, and Margaret pushed Louis. Louis called Margaret a bad name. Mrs. Bird said, Quiet down, please. Valentine's Day is about liking each other, not fighting. But Miss Bird made everyone in the class do workbooks for the rest of the morning. Everyone was mad at Louis and Margaret, even Gilbert. When it was reading time, Margaret looked through all of the Valentines again and again. It had I have two Valentines from Lewis, and a good one and a bad one. Lewis said, I didn't write a bad one. Someone else wrote my name. He looked through his piles of cards and said, I have two Valentines for Margaret and none from Gilbert. Then he shouted, Oh no! Gilbert wrote the bad cards and signed our names. Mrs. Bird said, Quiet, please. At lunch, no one wanted to sit near Gilbert, not even Patty. He had to sit by himself. When he peeked over his carrot and banana sandwich, he could see Patty and Lewis giggling at their table. Gilbert wondered if Lewis thought Patty had smiley eyes and a silly laugh too. He saw Margaret eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich like she did every day. Gilbert liked peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and wished he had one too. At recess, nobody played with Gilbert. Gilbert was very sorry that he had written the two nasty, mean Valentines. When they lined up to go inside, Patty finally asked, Why did you write those bad things to your friends, Gilbert? Because Louis tweaked my nose, Gilbert said, and Margaret made fun of my glasses. Louis said, I'm sorry I tweaked your nose. Gilbert, you can tweak mine if you want. Gilbert gave Louis's nose a tweak, but it didn't turn red. And Margaret said, I'm sorry I made fun of your glasses, Gilbert. I will wear them for the rest of the day. She put on Gilbert's glasses, but she couldn't see a thing. Gilbert couldn't see anything either, so she gave them back. In art class, Gilbert made two valentines out of red paper and lace. During spelling, Gilbert wrote a new poem for Louis. Violets are blue, roses are pink. I'm sorry I said your feet really stink. Gilbert thought that something nice. Gilbert thought of something nice about Margaret. He liked the way that she always smelled like peanut butter and jelly, so he wrote a new poem. Roses are red, jelly is sweet. You smell as good as the sandwich you eat. Then in math, Gilbert figured out that he had 364 days before he had to write any more Valentine poems. Finally, it was time for the party. Gilbert gave the new cards to Louis and Margaret and passed out the cookies that his mother had baked. And each cookie said, Happy Valentine's Day.